Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to go back into a conversation. And Hector, he took me through some other things and he realizes there's some depth that we need to get to around inventory commitment. It's this esoteric area of the platform that few people understand.
This is a conversation about inventory commitment. I like the word commitment and then supply allocation. We got a conversation here about just NetSuite supply and allocation tools, right? So NetSuite does this. It provides this inventory commitment and allocation tools, right? So people can prioritize like the limited inventory that's around. So there's a limitation to how much inventory you have. You have to try to figure out who's going to get it, which of your customers is going to get it. So they give you all kinds of tools to try to commit inventory to customers. Okay. And then businesses obviously try to establish something to coordinate that. They want to hold that. Ultimately, what they're trying to do is they want to say, what's available for me to sell from my current inventory and what's available for me to promise at some future date. I know I will get inventory in the future. Who can I give it to? How can I promise it to you? And how can I commit that to you? Right. So that's what we're trying to do. So there's these two areas here, and it's all the available and the future is coming into customer demand. There are two things, this commitment and allocation, supply allocation feature set. So the standard feature set, which most people understand and should have at least a little familiarity with, is what NetSuite offers to most customers using inventory, right? So you enable inventory and you get this standard feature set out of the box, right? So you're able to commit inventory items to any demand line. So I say demand because it's really anything that's like a work order, sales order, transfer order. All of those are demand records. They are trying to get inventory out of your like inventory locations, right? And so most people are familiar with this. It's super easy to set up. There's not much complexity here, low learning curve. There's another feature set that is in the realm. So these two feature sets aren't used together. You're using one or the other, right? And so in this other feature set, we call it supply allocation. So you do have to enable this feature, right? And so there's no cost to it. It should be available to everyone using inventory. So you just enable the feature, supply allocation, and then the supply allocation now creates these allocation records that on demand lines, and they help tell the story for each of the demand lines. And we'll see some examples of that. And it starts to plan out like commitment. So it recognizes, hey, I have inventory now. I'm going to be able to commit that inventory, or I have inventory coming. I will be able to allocate the inventory. So committing means I'm committing inventory that's available today. And then allocating in the future means I'm allocating to something that's not yet available. So again, it aligns the demand lines with available or future supply. So it's doing both of those things together, right? And then it adds some other features because now it kind of knows where that you could have some available inventory to promise, gives you some quantities, it gives you things like, tells you when an item is the earliest date it's available. It can now start calculating because you've enabled this feature. Okay, and it also calculates an expected ship date because now it knows what's coming in and it's allocating and it's doing the right thing. So this tool though requires a lot of setup. It's not easy at all. It's considerable. So you got to think about that. I think the most important takeaway here, right, is to know that there are no scripted or or direct user entry methods to commit transaction lines. All right, this is like a critical aspect of this. There is nothing that you could do either by entering something or getting a script to actually commit inventory or to allocate it. The only thing that you could do is use NetSuite or your knowledge of NetSuite's behavior to do the thing you want to do. Okay, so there's no direct. So if someone says, hey, I need you to point this commitment, I want you to say, yes, commit one of these items to this record. You can't do it directly. You have to do it indirectly. You have to know how NetSuite would behave and then try to use NetSuite's things to do that, right? So that's really important. So let me just show you a few of these things. You're going to set up some preferences in this, like account preferences under order management. This is, everyone should be able to see this on every account mostly that doesn't have supply enabled. So they'll see two things really here. Is this here where it says item commitment transaction ordering. So you get to order the transactions in such a way that they will commit in this sequence. So every time that an order is generated, or any time that an item receipt is created or inventory is adjusted, you increase inventory, then the engine will trigger and it will use this kind of method, whatever you've listed here, to do that. And then you can say perform item commitment after transaction entry. So basically you're asking the engine, the commitment engine, to run every time a transaction is created. So it tries to do this, okay? And you can see there's three general like sort orders. You could do it by priority. This is a customer attribute, or a transaction date on the sales order, or an expected ship date. So there's some things, it's not very rich, right? There's not a lot of complexity here, not very rich. In addition to this like standard way of doing things, you could do something else. You could perform a manual order commitment, right? Where you're saying, okay, I want to commit my orders, not based on this after every transaction. I could do this. I could commit my orders by finding the orders that I want to commit and then checking these boxes, right? So again, it looks like here you do have some control, kind of do. You could say, I want to do all of this, and you submit a job to NetSuite. And then NetSuite does the commitment based on your settings here, and it performs it. Now, can it always succeed? No, maybe something happened in the environment. You know, someone deleted an item receipt as you were doing this, and now there's nothing to commit, right? So it's not like you're forcing commitments here, but you do have some control where you can create manual inventory commit outside of just NetSuite doing this automatically. The other thing that you could do besides that is that you could schedule this. You can create a search that will list your orders in some sequence, and then that will then trigger commitments. So you could schedule these inventory commitments. One of our customers leveraged this. They created a very complicated search results, and they have these sales orders that are holding on to inventory, and then they'll release that inventory slowly, and they create these searches and they sequence them and they order them. Very complicated, but they're leveraging this kind of thing to try to drive their results. Right. So that's another way that you could get to committing inventory. Okay. So these are all like solutions here. There's other screen that's important. It's the reallocate item commitment. So you could take anything that's already committed and you can give it some recommitment. So it allows you to remove some lines, deselect some lines, and add new lines. And you could try to then commit lines together, right? So you have some other controls to reallocate item commitments. Now, just as a note here, on this screen, right, you will not see if the commitment that you're trying to remove is already firm, right? If you firmed up that commitment, this reallocation screen will not work for that. Even though it shows up like you could, it will not. Okay. The other thing is if you have a lot numbered environment, if you associated the lot to a commitment, it also will not remove that commitment. So there are some little things, nuances that like confuse people, that drive people crazy. So just in just summary here, this is the standard stuff. You have some priorities where you can select these kinds of priorities. This is the inventory situation, right? It's only on available inventory, right? Only the timing acts anytime when one of these events is triggered. You do have ATS, you do not have ATP with this out of the box, right? And then the expected ship date, there's no control. It just defaults to tran date or what you want to enter in on that field, okay? And the skill required to implement this is pretty easy, right? Everyone should know this. So the other thing that we have is supply allocation, right? So supply allocation takes you to the next level, and it gives you a lot more things. And really, it's this combination of features, right? And working together, they make current commitments and future supply allocations, right? So it's doing both of this work for us now. Okay, that's how it works, right? So here, right, our feature here is it's possible to associate these demand and supply lines to each other. So we are trying to associate orders with lines with orders. Okay, that's what we're trying to do. The supply allocation here, I would say, it's really complex. You could create lots of complex scenarios, lots of different strategies to overcome issues. But of course, with more complexity comes more thinking and processing and kind of making sure that the system is working and behaving the way you want. You could see that the setup, there's a lot more things. Remember that sort order I told you before, I only had 3 options. You get many more options. Now, not only do you have these other options, you have all of these strategies on how a strategy will actually allocate inventory, future inventory. Sometimes you could have an allocation strategy that uses future and some allocation strategies that don't. So you can kind of use them, create many strategies to kind of fine tune. And then it's okay, I have all these strategies. Now I got to get them onto my line, right? You got to get them onto the line. This is a little graph. It's good. This is something David actually built. I kind of took it from one of his design docs, but this is what's kind of going on. You have available inventory. The future supply allocation tool is trying to connect these lines with available inventory on things that are right now. And then it tries to do things oh, I'm going to allocate, you got a purchase order, and I'm going to try to allocate by these dates against this purchase order. And it creates these allocation records. One of the real problems with this, I think the most fundamental problem is this red line, is that this available inventory is always available to you, and it will always use a future supply, even if your intention is not. So it doesn't just hold it back. You have to use a strategy that would not commit, because available inventory is always available. So NetSuite on its own will want to use that commitment, even though your intention is not to. You might want to say, hold on to this inventory because tomorrow I'll get more orders, and leave this one here with this purchase order because I don't want to mess with it. You're stuck unless you start doing all kinds of complex things. You get a nice record though. You get a nice allocation record. You could see the item. This is just the allocation record. You could see this one's coming from inventory. Sometimes it's coming from a purchase order. So these allocation records are helpful in seeing how things are being linked up. Sometimes I'm allocating from inventory. Sometimes I'm allocating from a future thing. And NetSuite does a really good job. And you could see all that. If it all works, it's great, right? You could see all the records. You could query the records. You could do things. So here are some things, right? Side by side, right? You have automatic on save. Schedules have robust filtering. You could have scheduling for this as well, for the supply allocation. You have multiple commitment priorities, right? That you could drive that you didn't have access to before, more than just these. And then it acts on available and future supply, right? So you could have 2 situations that we're trying to capture here. The commitment timing, the strategies connect on a reference date, right? So now you can have when things are trying to commit and when they're not. So you have a lot more flexibility. So all of this is great. I would say this is at least moderate. You could have a very complicated, and we tried very complex solutions using this and saw what came out of the fallout of that. All of these solutions are now in production. They're stable. They're working for our customers, a made to order company. And so they have a lot of work orders and they have a lot of things. They came to me with that problem that said, hey, this reallocation screen, can you fix it? And I go, let's talk about your problem, right? So we have this build order environment. We had a problem with this reallocation page. So we have our solution. What are we trying to do? What we did was we removed the automatic NetSuite commit. We're going to bring everything as do not commit. Ooh, that's interesting. We're going to take complete control over commitments. And then we're going to create this custom utility that's multi-usable, it's scalable, right? It's leveraging MapReduce scripts in the background, and it's giving us some on-screen feedback. So let me show you the tool. It's really nice. You create this filtering mechanism right here, right? You have all of these filtered things. I just said, give me something by this priority. And you could see it finds lots of orders that I can go ahead and do work against. And it does like some item analysis for us. So you can look at the items and what's available and what it will do. Okay, this is helpful. The script is going through all of the items and sequencing them and saying where they're going to be at, what's going to happen here. And then there's a little item group stuff too as well. So there's kind of data for a user to be able to do that. They will then go ahead and select this, and then the engine will go ahead and do work. And the work that it's doing is basically looking at every line of this and sequentially in the proper order, creating a work order and building it and committing the line, doing that all at once, or it's deleting a work order and using available inventory. And it's doing it line by line sequentially. Okay, so what happens is here's the little utility to see how this works. I loaded a batch that was processed earlier today, right? And then you could see the batch itself has all of this language here that says what happened, what did the tool actually do? And it says, look, I built a work order and I committed the quantity, right? I keep going through, and you could see here that in these cases, it was using available inventory and it committed the thing on the sales order directly. It knows that because everything is do not commit. So we're just flipping the switch one bit at a time, and we're in complete control over what NetSuite's doing. So it's like, say, NetSuite, don't do anything for me. I'll do it, and I'll flip the bits as I want to do it. So very nice utility. They've been using this for a year. They like it so much, they want to automate it now. They want to not have a user actually come in here. They would like it to run nightly in a certain way so that they can get more output. The next company is a company that David Jacobs and Matthew Marchant worked on. They have a similar kind of problem. They're getting lots of items of different sizes. They're like a golf apparel company. So they're bringing in lots of golf shirts and they're reselling it to golf stores. Their problem here was that they had a problem where ACS tried to help them implement the future supply allocation tool. And what they did was they said, okay, let's create all of these user event scripts that nightly try to look at the world and then tag these lines. That whole thing never worked. Never worked. It could never do the proper strategy allocation. It could never create the right allocation. They struggled that for months and years. We evaluated what they could do. We tried to help with what they had. At the end of the day, we said, you got to get rid of the whole thing. We're going to build you a solution. This nice little tool. And all it is, hey, take a style, which is like a shirt type, say, and then give me this, like you could have a color filter here in the location. And then you could go through this list of all of the inventory that are either already committed or need commitments. We have different shading to indicate that. And then the user can go ahead and commit right on this line. So it does it immediately, right? It's like right here, I think in Sandbox, we have a little bit of a problem, but this line would commit, or I could say reallocate this line, right? So I could do this kinds of features. You notice you can get like feedback right away. It's really nice, Matthew. But what you'll see is you could see all of this is like inventory that's available. You see all of this here, inventory that's available. And then you also see inventory that's coming in. So what this is all driven by is just a query that sorts all of your demand and supply into one large table. And just you could think about this as, hey, I don't want to give up my regular inventory. I want it to be over here. So you just change the date. You change the date, you move the date over here, and then it like sorts it again and it removes those commitments, and you can kind of shape the world this way. Again, the nice thing here is that you can sort of, in a way, allocate items to POs by just changing this date feature here. And then you have control over what you want to allocate or commit and then reallocate. Let's get NetSuite out of the way. Let's start taking control, and we'll just do it bit by bit. Okay, that's kind of our strategy that we've employed. All right.
Hector, and I just quickly want to ask, these two tools that you did not require the supply allocation extra feature. You stuck with the
Correct.
basic features, get the switches the way you want, and then you're
Yes.
playing with the bit on
Yes.
the lines in the sales orders and so forth, where it has a commitment drop down, correct?
Yes, exactly. We're getting out of that future supply and we're creating our own environment. Exactly right. Again, we try to get future supply. We want to go native, want to do it. It just turned out to be too complex. This use of available inventory first was a problem. This lot numbering was also a problem in their world. What they wanted was just intuitive ways to point records to each other. And they wanted a simple like reallocation tool, right? So that's really what they wanted. So we created this little link here to a suitelet. And this suitelet basically allows us to create an allocation to this line. So for this item, I have multiple lines that I could look at. Maybe I shouldn't because I'm already negative over here. Let me go to this one here. Right, so I could create this allocation. So 60 units of this item want to be allocated to this PO. And so I just go ahead and save that allocation. And that allocation comes up, right? It's created right by this suitelet, and you could see the record here that it created. So we're creating our own allocation, our future supply allocation record right here. So we're holding this record, and this record is like a pointer to us to know that when this item, this PO gets received, then we'll go ahead and create the environment that this order right here, this original inventory will actually get this commitment, okay? So this is like a little bit difficult to accomplish, but we've written the scripts in such a way that we're flipping the bits sequentially and then assuring that each of these allocated items are getting committed before other things can get committed, right? So again, it's the same strategy that we're using it time and time again, just in different applications. This tool also allows you to allocate from a purchase order. So you could look at a purchase order and see all the demand that's out there and then begin to allocate the purchase order right from there.
And this one's different than NetSuite supply allocation. It's basically, we got a similar model, but we got full control now versus,
right.
And so we're able to target how when the inventory comes in exactly where you want it to go.
Right. You don't have this whole date structuring and you're hoping to get the right connection. You're creating the connection yourself, right? You create the connection. And then when that receipt comes in, then we handle the proper commitment strategy that needs to happen, right? We sort the orders in the correct way. We flip the switches and then we commit the items that we want to. Here, I guess the takeaway for each of you is to go, when you're in this environment, right, you need to understand what NetSuite's doing and then decide on how can I best use the environment to create what I want to for the customer. And maybe we could use supply allocation, but there's a lot of other opportunities to do things, that are innovative. They're great.
We hope you found these insights helpful. If you're ready to get more out of your NetSuite investment and unlock untapped potential in your business, start your journey with Prolecto. Contact us today.